Today's guest is Vicente Wolf, a designer known for creating interiors that feel globally informed and remarkably alive. For him, design has never been just about rooms, it's about atmosphere, intuition, and a lifelong relationship with the natural world. In many ways, it seems his work reflects the belief that interiors and landscapes speak the same language. In this conversation, we explore the idea of letting nature lead inside and out, and what it means to design spaces that feel lived in rather than controlled. We talk about the balance between the natural and the manicured, how rooms can be composed with the same rhythm and movement as the landscape, and why restraint is often what gives a space its depth. He also shares how place has shaped his perspective and how he approaches creating environments that invite connection, conversation, and a sense of presence. This conversation is about more than design. It's about how we live, what we surround ourselves with, and how spaces quietly shape how we feel. Enjoy. Welcome to Grandma Silver, where tradition meets today. I'm Allie, your host of the Grandma Silver podcast and founder of the Grand Millennial Lifestyle. Here, we blend aesthetics with nostalgia, engaging in conversations with lifestyle brands, designers, and more to rediscover the timeless charm of the past. Join me as we journey from home to heart, illuminating the past and polishing the present with the gleam of Grandma Silver. I'm excited to chat today. We have lots of fun things to talk about. As I sit here and you're also sitting in your sweater, I think we're both ready for spring.
It's going to be summer. I think we forgot spring already.
Well, I want to have you introduce yourself before we get any further and let everyone know who you are and what you do.
Hi, my name is Vicente Wolf. I'm an interior designer, and I am based in New York City, though we work all around the world.
Okay. How long have you been doing this work?
I've been doing this for 50 years.
Wow. Can you tell me a little bit of your background and how you got it? Like, was this always on your radar? Is this always what you wanted to be doing?
I come from Cuba. We came to this country in 61, and I came to New York in approximately 65. Tried a lot of different things, and I was very lucky. My parents in Cuba were in construction, so
Okay.
I was very much aware of plans, and you know, so many people are so sort of afraid of plans and architecture and all that.
Hmm.
I was brought up with it, so it was very easy for me to do a transition into it as I knew the guts of what it is to put a space together and all that. I tried a lot of different things: merchandising, advertising, modeling, acting. I fell into this by pure chance. But the moment I fell into it, I took to it like, they say, duck to water.
Hmm.
And so I started working in a showroom in the D&D building for like a year and a half. Then I started to freelance for a lot of the designers that used to come into the showroom. And from there, I became an associate of a design firm. And then I became partners with Bob Patino, and the name of the firm was Patino Wolf. It was a perfect time to go into the industry, as at that time it was, or you were of the parish Hadley, traditional, but very few contemporary
Hmm.
design. And so the firm, all we were doing was contemporary design. And so that was a very small group of people that were doing that. So it was really a perfect time for it because we weren't decorating, we were designing, we
Hmm.
were creating environments, we weren't applying tassels to curtains, sort of thing. And that's the way it's been until October of '88 that I went on my own. It's been Vincent Wolf Associate since then.
So I'm glad that you touched on that you were designing, not decorating. And the reason I say that is because I think there is, for the average person, they don't understand the discrepancy. And I'm hoping that you could just briefly outline what the difference is.
This is my interpretation.
Sure, sure.
Decoration is applying to a surface. You're layering. design to me, we deal with architecture, we design furniture, we create environments that have been transformed to what they were before, not by applying decoration, but by creating environments.
Now, the other question I had that's more specific to your work, you mentioned contemporary. So is that what you consider yourself? You work with contemporary design?
It's through the time it's evolved, but I see the present. I think to move forward, you always have to bring the past. I think it's always important to have a sense of where we're coming from to be able to be in the present. My spaces are modern, but that doesn't mean that those spaces don't have elements of the past. No different than a blending of cultures and periods within that space,
Hmm.
but always being seen in the present, not trying to reproduce the past.
I have questions about that later. One thing that we're talking about, we will kind of touch on a lot of different things today, but
Right.
one area of focus with it being spring, depending where you live.
Right.
And
Maybe.
yeah, you do a really beautiful job of not only working with interiors, but also that you have this relationship with the outside world, natural environments. And I would love to hear a little bit about how that developed and why, but also how those worlds come together for you in this world of design.
My training, besides what happened to me as a child with my parents and the business they were in, really, I'm dyslexic. So schooling has never been a thing of, I can teach classes, but I can't take classes because how I absorb things is very different. So my training is very visual. I see things in my mind three-dimensionally. A lot of the training that I've had comes from traveling, from different cultures that I see and that I have traveled to. And I'm not talking about going to Rome and Paris and London, but going through all through the Far East, all the Middle East, South America, Africa. In each of these places, I have always been able to not to copy what I see, but absorb what I see. And that gets applied to my work, whether it is with color or textures or objects that I buy and send back to my showroom, which is VW Home. And those are objects that I have literally as I find all through the world. Some objects that I have designed and then made produced in China or India or Indonesia, whether I'm in the middle of the jungle, in a hut, connecting with people, buying things from them and incorporating them in my work. All of those things are things that have made me who I am. Besides that is going to museums, looking at art, not necessarily looking at what other designers are doing, but building a file in my mind of details, colors, ideas that I then reinterpret in my work.
How did the plants and natural world come in?
Well, because most of the places I go are in nature. Whether you are in Indonesia, looking at how they weave palm to cover the walls with it, to how that then translates to how I do textures on walls. The colors, living in New York, it's all grays and blacks, and even if there is color, but that is what one is sort of seeing when you're in the middle of the desert in Namibia and you're looking at the sunset and you see how the color of the sand to the color of the sky, all those things are things that really you don't forget. You may consciously forget, but subconsciously it's always in my mind. Colors of wood, you're walking on the beach in the skeleton coast in Namibia, and you're seeing bones that have been bleached by the sun, pieces of wood that have just, just sort of started to disintegrate that I'm always looking at. It's just so beautiful and so much more than humanly made because it's all sort of evolved. I was talking to somebody the other day about the difference of symmetrical and balance.
Mm,
Nature balances, doesn't create symmetry unless it's the face of a cat that half of it is repeated on the other half. But in general, it's all about balance. Those are the things that I've learned to understand and to apply to my work. You're looking at all the different elements that you see in nature, how light travels through leaves when you're walking in a forest. Yeah, all those things are just things that we try to recreate in work and lighting and in sophisticated environments. But when you see it in nature, you see it just so completely different.
yeah.
And it just changes your perspective of the world.
Well, going off of that, before we talk more about
The next,
nature, yeah, so my background is archaeology and anthropology. And so I love to talk about the way that culture influences everything.
Mhm.
And you have as a designer, a really unique perspective because you had unique experiences as a child. So many people that I speak with are from here and they have traveled, but they are not starting
So,
their lives outside of what
right,
they know
where
here.
they're surviving or living
Yeah.
in.
And you also have the unique perspective of your parents having enmeshed you in kind of this world already, which a lot of people perhaps they get an internship or a job, and so they have a bit of experience in it that way, but it's not part of who they are growing up and what they know. So how have those, I know those are kind of different experiences, but do you feel that those have influenced your work
Yeah,
or your
absolutely.
perspective now?
Because it's not about, oh, I use green because in Cuba there was green. It has to do with an approach to life
Mhm.
or to work or to how you interpret things. It's a much more relaxed point of view. It's more casual, it's softer, less strict. Maybe that's part of balance compared to symmetry
I was
because
hearing that it wasn't forced. When you were talking about that, my brain was saying it's not forced in nature.
no, not at all. It's evolved. It's interesting because I traveled many times to Egypt and to Iran and to Syria and to places where the sophisticated eye has brought balance and symmetry to its highest level. And that's such a wonderful balance too, being in the jungle and being in places that are, one would say primitive, but it's not really primitive because they're so sophisticated about living in their environment.
Hmm.
Uh, and so, you take somebody from Manhattan and you put them in the jungle of Indonesia, and there they're primitive because they don't know how to function. It's seeing all these different cultures that keep adding layers to one's perspective of work. And it's so subliminal because it's not thinking of being in Egypt and, oh, well, that's going to do this to my work. I've been to Egypt, I would say like 7 times, 8 times. And each time it's so funny because I see it so differently.
Mm.
Because each time the ignorance layer keeps being removed and you become so much more absorbed into an understanding of what you're looking at because maybe you've seen it for the past 40 years. And each time you're seeing it so different. You're not in awe. Now you're studying it in a different way.
The experience changes. Interesting. Going back to environment,
Yes.
I know you're in, New York, but you also are in multiple spaces in New York. So we have the city, but then you also have
Montauk.
Montauk. Yeah. So, of course, you've been so many places, right? But if we're talking about home and its influence on your work, living between New York City, Montauk, how does that shape and we could even weave in if you want to talk about your travels and other places you've been in the world. But how does all of this shape your sense of space, atmosphere, environment, perhaps even your
Well,
approach to the function of a space?
okay, the house in Montauk was built in the 70s. I mean, it doesn't look anything like what it was when I bought it. But so many of the detailing is detailing that is so influenced by what I have seen. From the moment you drive up and you started going up the stairs up to the house, the same stone that's there goes up the stairs through the outside into the house, throughout the whole house, and into the showers. It just keeps repeating, which is so much of what you see, in nature. There's no necessity to, okay, this is the inside and this is the outside. You want the inside and the outside to be one, because when you're in those spaces, you want to transition from one environment to the other in a really seamless way. It helps to increase visually the size of the space. You see those elements that are outside very different when you see them in the inside. I'm making this up, but if you have an 18th century chair sitting on rough stone floors, it looks, you're seeing those floors very differently now than when it was outside with pots on it and tree leaves on it. And I think that when you're seeing the outside and the inside blending together, you're bringing elements that you usually see outside on the inside. And that gives those spaces a more natural sense, a more relaxed sense, a more sense of less formality.
Hmm. It's opening this other question for me, which is, in what other ways do you let nature lead? Even though you're working with interiors,
With
things.
color. I
Okay.
mean, in Montauk, the floors is a stone called Crab Orchard, which it comes from South Carolina. And it's just all these different shades of from sliced celadon to peaches and beiges, very subtle.
Hmm.
There you then look at the ocean and you look at the beach and you look at the elements you're seeing outside, and all those tonalities are coming into the space.
Hmm.
All the upholstery is in white slipcovers. The things that are on it, whether it's pillows or throws, are all in those very subtle tones that are at the outside, but then repeats itself on the stones that's on the floor. So it's all very sort of homogeneous in how you see it. How wood looks, when it's, on the beach and it's sort of like a driftwood color. Those colors are all on the inside of the house. The transition in color, in textures, in finishes, when they go from the outside to the inside, all those things are things that bring a sense of calmness, a sense of not reality, but a sense
Ground.
of yeah, with nature, with
Yeah.
not just nature, but what is outside on the inside. And that, I think, helps to make people feel comfortable in a space, wherever you are. When those elements of nature come in, all of a sudden you're in tune with what's outside. You're not seeing two totally different worlds. You want it always to flow easily, because when that happens, your environments have longevity. because they're in tune with what you're looking at. And it just makes people feel really good.
I'm wondering how much nature you prioritize to bring in to a space versus letting a view do the talking.
Something that I do, I mean, whether I'm Taos, New Mexico, or as I say, Jackson Hole, or Florida, or wherever, when I go to the site for the first time, I always bring a couple of baggies and I walk on the outside and I pick up things that I'm seeing there.
Okay.
A piece of wood, or a rock, or some sand, or just whatever, which I bring back then to the office, and I then have it, in the area where I'm working on that particular job. You keep looking at it and you keep sort of not being reminded, but being sort of aware
Mm-hmm.
of what this space that you're designing is, where it's going into. That you're going into the
The
desert,
setting.
or
Yeah,
you're
it's the
going into
setting.
the ocean, or wherever it is. There's a
Synergy.
yeah, right, right,
Yeah.
right.
I don't know how involved you are in designing like an outdoor space for any.
Yeah, we are. We
Okay.
do. We work a lot on that.
What is the difference in your eyes between like a designed landscape and a lived-in, more natural landscape? And how do you try to accomplish what's the balance there when you're creating those sorts of spaces?
Well, I mean, for instance, in Montauk, it's very hilly, but it's very rolling. Part of it is how I redesigned the topography, so it's everything is soft, which is part of giving, when you're there, a more softer, relaxed quality. So all the plantings that I've done are all sort of, let's say, like hostas, with big leaves and very soft. So part of it looks a little tropical,
Hmm.
but the other part just ties to what you're seeing the land looking like. So that's what I try to do. I try to just have it copacetic one with the other. Not necessarily that it's all, if you're in the desert, it's all cactus, but that it has the feeling of where you are. If it's harsh, then things are a little harsher. If it's soft, then things tie to the softness of what you're looking at.
Yeah, you're not fighting the
Yeah.
landscape. Yeah.
Right, and trying to make it something that it's not. For me, I love jungle. I mean, maybe because that's how I was brought up. I love orchids, love more. I don't like things that are very manicured, because what you're trying to do is to tame nature. And I think it's better when nature runs a little wild. I think it softens the environment, and I think it gives the viewer a sense that it's not all man produced, but nature is slightly taking over.
Do you apply that same? I don't know if allowing things to like be imperfect is the phrase I want to use here, but do you apply that same
Imperfect.
concept inside?
Absolutely. I mean, but that, something, I think that comes from how I got to where I am. I think schooling, because of tests and because of what you're supposed to remember, and the competition, everything must be perfect. You must be the best. When you've learned instinctually, it doesn't require perfection. And that's not to say that, to me, the architecture must be perfect.
Hmm.
Those lines must all line up. Everything must have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But what goes into those environments doesn't have to be perfect, because that is what gives it that balance of
Hmm.
yin and yang, rough and smooth, crude and polished. And that's, I think, what gives a space longevity,
Yeah.
because it's not all started today at 12:45, and it all looks like it's all started at that point. I love environments that when you walk in, You don't know when it was done. Whether they're traditional or contemporary, it doesn't matter. That's what gives it a sense of traveling well through time. I hate thematic environments. No inventiveness or imagination or freedom of thinking was involved. You were given a formula and you must follow that formula. It's interesting because I've been doing this, as I said, for 50 years. So I think, how many more jobs do I have in me? And if there's 30 more jobs, I want each one to be unique, each one to be the expression of 50 years of thinking and doing and evolving. And I think that, that to me is my goal.
One of the things that, the outdoors, nature, you've kind of touched on the interiors having interest, right? Layered, collected. You didn't use those words, but what I'm hearing is it's boring if it's formulaic, if it's thematic. It should be a little
Right.
more interesting with your cultural background and your traveling. That makes sense. So, you're touching on nature and you like jungle and kind of that lush environment. That is alive. Like nature is literally life. And I'm curious, as someone who's passionate about that and appreciates that kind of that surround, how do you make a room feel alive?
I mean, if you saw my apartment, people say, "Oh, you have a green thumb." Well, not really. What I have is appreciation of a live thing. I've had plants that I've had for 40 years. They're friends. You have to talk to them. You have to give them the pleasure and the energy that they give back to you.
Mm.
When a plant blooms, that's saying, here, this is a gift for you. So you have to have that in environments. I think an environment with nothing alive is dead. It's like something underneath a glass dome. It gives nothing, it takes nothing.
Yeah.
And you want your environments to be giving to the people who enter it by seeing things that are imperfect, things that are blooming, even flowers. I love cut flowers because you see them go through the process. They're all closed, then they open, then they die. And I
Hmm.
think that is so rewarding because that's life.
This might be a redundant question because you might have just answered it in part, but the other part of nature is it moves, right? And you're talking about the cycle of, I mean, it transitions, it has this flow, which remains interesting. Are there other ways other than bringing life into a space that you like mimic movement in a room?
Well, I mean, I don't use pattern. I love seeing how shapes play one against the other. I think if you have a club chair and it's in a floral print, that floral print is always the floral print. But if that chair is powder blue against a white wall and it's 9 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it's going to look different and it's going to move because how they juxtapose one against the other. When you say to me movement, movement is the play of shapes one against the other as you move around the space and the light evolves during the day. And that's how I see that interaction of shapes and forms and light. And you need places and settings that allow your eye to rest.
Yes.
Because if it's all doing that, you never really have that moment to think.
Hmm.
You just look at something or look at how light comes through a window on the floor, and it gives you that moment to like, just let the air out, just enjoy it in what you're looking at. And
Yeah.
if the whole space is just
Overwhelmed.
kinetic, I can appreciate it. I mean, if you go to, which is being bombed right now, Isfahan in Iran, and you go into the mosques and you see all this mosaic and all this pattern, it's just pattern on pattern on pattern. It's wonderful. But then for me, I have to walk outside and just see a blue sky. And
Breathe.
it's like eating chili for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You need like, wait, my stomach needs a little rest there. In this society that we live in, more is sometimes more. Is that enough? I just finished installing a job and it's all bleached floors. It's on the 39th floor of this is skyscraping, not scraping, but a skyscraper building. They said, well, the rug is beautiful, but then I see all this floor. I mean, shouldn't there be more rugs and more stuff? And I said, how can you see the rug that I put down when there's more stuff? You want the balance of less and more. If you have too much more, you don't really get to appreciate the single things, a
Mhm.
shape, form, I don't know.
Well, you're touching on
It,
something important, which is that you're not just decorating, you're designing, right? You're not just filling a room with stuff to make it pretty. You're allowing the object to be part of the artwork.
well, and I think it, not in this case, but it had that I was talking about, but it's a lack of sophistication. It's a insecurity that is that enough? I mean, I think most people know it when they're cooking that, oh yeah, that's enough salt, that's enough pepper. But a room is a very different because they really don't know when it's enough. And
Hmm.
I think that you have to wait, let it settle, absorb it, and then make your decision. Let it sit. If you don't let it sit in your mind and in your soul, you never get to really enjoy it.
You're touching on something really interesting, which I really don't talk much about. But as a designer, how do you know when you're done with a space? If because that's such a beautiful philosophy, but is it just instinctual for you? Or, I mean, how does that work?
I didn't study it. So
Right.
whatever what you get, what you see is what you get. It's my gut.
Hmm.
That's right. That's not. In so many situations, it's like, oh well, there could be this and there could be that. I love that, but why? How about that? How about this? How about that? How about that? I look at that. That's fine. That's it. That is the problem a lot with our society. Are you pretty enough? Are you thin enough? Are you rich enough? Are
Hmm.
you talented enough? Are you funny enough? Stop and think about what you have, not what you don't have.
It's a
I,
good
I think
reminder, this overconsumption and
that's when you're in the jungle and you're in the middle of Papua New Guinea and the men are walking literally naked. They don't need it. What they have is enough. Do they need a fur coat? Do they need a Mercedes? They got the chicken and they're cooking it and that's it. Not in the society that we live in, because I think if you think the way of Papua New Guinea, you're not in sync with the society. And we have so many more choices.
hmm
That's the advantage of making a quick decision and going by your gut because there's so much.
it's overwhelming.
I don't need to see 500 fabrics to pick what I think should be on that sofa. What matters is the environment. If a tree has one dead leaf, does that mean the tree is no good anymore? The people that work with me always are fascinated because I can walk up to the whole wall of baskets with fabrics and all that. I say, oh, that one. And that's it. Well, I mean, don't you? No, it works. If that one fabric ruins the room, then the room wasn't right to begin with. It makes no sense.
There is a bigger problem if that throws the whole design off, is
Right,
yeah.
right. But that's not to say that the idea of cooking a meal completely and having it and say somebody, oh well, no, it needs more of this and it needs more of that. I cooked it. I thought it was perfect. And you find that many times the insecurity that a lot of people have that, oh, I should change something so it makes it better.
Yeah.
Very confusing, the sum of the parts. If you're reading a beautiful poem, is every word, every letter has to be perfect? It's such responsibility or such pressure. Perfect, perfect. Everything must be perfect. It has the formula to make you feel better because if you're in an environment that's in discord, you suck that up. It throws you off. You want to feel that you're in sync with your environment. And
Hmm.
if that environment is in discord, then you can't be in that right place. I want the work that I do in the next conclusion of my career to be the best that it can be. The sum of all the parts of my travel and art and theater and things that I've absorbed. I think it's important.
This will probably vary based on the job, right? But and the client and their environment. Is there anything that you aim for other than your client saying, "This looks great, thank you," that you hope your spaces evoke?
This is a big word, but to work with ladies and gentlemen, to have people that bring a sense of positiveness to the process of creating their home. The opportunity to free think, the less restrained you are, the more you are able to bring out your knowledge. The more that happens, the better it is, as a finished product.
So I want to just throw it out there for folks who are listening that in the show notes of this episode, I will put links to your website and your social media so that they
Thank
can
you.
follow along and find you easily. But I thank you for taking the time to chat today. This has been really wonderful, and I love to, start thinking about warmer weather and being outdoors.